explained here. And those, many of them are missing, meaning many of your friends, they might be studying, but at the same time, I think they are not actually getting to learn all these things so easily. Some of these basic, they are basic concept, simple concept. Even senior people who are working in companies who have more experience, still they lack some of these basic concepts. Now, all I'm trying to say is, so if anybody is learning web development, if anybody is working, so refer them to us actually. So we can also explain them. We can fix their basics also. Yeah. So they might have think, okay, that I know already all these things. I've done all these things, but they will struggle. Thing is, see, even I will struggle if I don't know some of the basics. I'm asked to work. Yeah, ChatGPT, Copilot, what not. Everything is there, right? But first of all, you should have an idea, right? There is something like this also to ask for ChatGPT. Okay, yeah. All right, so let's continue with what we have been discussing. Quick revision. Yesterday we discussed on the three, or maybe in fact I say four different types of functions in JavaScript. So let's go a bit in detail into understanding what are functions. Yeah, so this syntax is called function declaration syntax. It just uses a keyword function name parenthesis. Here it is where you can pass one or more parameter 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. Yes, declaration of the function is always once, but later you can call how many ever times you want. No limit on how many times I can call a function. Correct? It is not at all a problem. Fine. Now the interesting thing is, and a very important concept also to understand is called local variables and outer variables. So,
Sir, your screen is not visible, sir.
okay, I think I forgot to share with you guys. Okay, after Gagan took over. So what I was saying, uh, yeah, we defined functions. We know the different types of creating functions, and I'm saying you can call the function any number of times once you define it. So this syntax using the function keyword followed by the name this is actually called as function declaration syntax. Alright. Now post that there is one very important concept to understand. What is it called as local variable and global variable? So anybody know the meaning of what is local variable and global variable? So we know how to create variable. In JavaScript there are three syntax to create a variable. Assume this is a function body. Yeah, I'm saying assume this rectangle box is a function body. If at all you create a variable inside this box, be it declaration, initialization, yeah. So the variables which are actually defined within this function, they are actually called local variables. Do you know why they are called local variables? Because they are local to this function. Yeah, which means you don't, or these variables does not exist outside this box. I cannot print a value of a here. If I try to access it, I cannot access. It will throw that reference error. Again, if I try to do the same thing for b, it's the same thing. So local variables are just local to this function body only. You cannot access them outside. So this, if you try here accessing here, this will not work. So this is a reference error. Okay. Any variables defined within the function, they get destroyed. Okay, they get destroyed once this function definition or function invocation is over. and they are no longer visible also outside. So this type of variable, the other one, let's understand the next one. So these variables which are actually defined outside the function. Yeah, as you can see in an example, they have defined some variable outside the function also. We can define a variable in JavaScript, that is possible. And these variables are actually called outer variables. Sometimes we call it even global variables. Now the thing with outer variable is this variable I can access it anywhere within that file. Assume this is a complete .js file. Yeah, this whole thing is a .js file. This is where I have a function. I have declared a variable. Yeah, let's see as 100. Then this variable I can access inside the function also, and I can access it anywhere within this file. If at all I have one more function defined below this, okay, so there also I can access this value of C. It is not only I can access it, it is also possible I can modify it. What is it? I can modify the value of C anywhere, not just accessing. Okay, so this is what is an outer variable and a local variable. Is it clear? Yeah, it's a very
Yes, sir.
important concept. So there is a concept called global variables also. Yeah, so some of the times even these outer variables also called as global variables. Okay, next let's understand some more things with respect to function. See, now we are trying to understand slowly what is inside those function, what all related to function. So now we understood about declarations and variables. Next we are trying to understand the parameters within that within that function. Then we'll understand the return value of the function. Okay, there is also a topic on naming a function, how to name a function. All right, so the next thing that we ought to understand, yeah, is the parameters. So now what are parameters? So we all know that we can invoke functions. At the time of invocation, we can also pass in some data. We can pass in some data to these variables from and text. For example, here we have two variables called from and text. To these variables, if I have to pass an external data, then okay, so this data will be copied into the respective variables, correct? And will be copied to from, hello will be copied to text. These are also called as positional parameter, which means first value is copied to the first parameter, second value is copied to the second parameter. It won't interchange. Yeah. So parameter basically helps me pass some data into the function during the function invocation. Also, as a standard practice, you should not hard code the value. What is it? You should not hard code the data. For example, I will ask you write a program to add two numbers. What will you do? I can create a function like this. Yeah, I can create a function like function add. Okay, many of you will write. Yeah, let a is equal to 10. Let b is equal to 20. So now answer console.log a plus b. This is a function to add two numbers, correct? But what's the problem with this function? Problem is it is not reusable. It only works for these given inputs. or which are hard code inputs. But now if I parameterize this function, I add some parameters to it. Let's say, a comma b. That's how I'll receive a value. Just like variable, you don't have to say let or const. Yeah, you just have to mention the name of the variable. These are not defined anywhere else. Here itself, when you name, you give the name, then they're created. Then you want to do console.log, yeah, do console.log. A plus b. See, now I can call this function any number of times with any different outputs. Or any different inputs, not the outputs. So I can call with any number of inputs of different so on.
Sir,
Yeah, tell me.
ಸರ್ ಇವಾಗ ಆ್ಯಡ್ ಆಫ್ ಎ ಕಮ ಬಿ ಇವಾಗ ಎ ಕಮ ಬಿ ವೇರಿಯೇಬಲ್ಸ್ನ ಇವಾಗ ಗ್ಲೋಬಲ್ ಅಂತಾರೋ ಇಲ್ಲ ಲೋಕಲ್ ವೇರಿಯೇಬಲ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಾರೋ ಸರ್ ಇವಾಗ ಅದನ್ನು?
Good question. So these parameters will be local to this function only. These parameters will be local to this function only. So let's check. Let's check how. So now if it is global variable, I should be able to access outside that function also, correct? Now let's check the value of a. A is not defined. But I called this function just now. And this value 3 got copied to A. 4 is also copied to B. Correct? See, B is also not accessible. Which means this is proving that these parameters are again local to that function only. Clear? Yeah? Okay. There's one more aspect of it. Let me show you what exactly it is. Okay. So this is there as a concept called function parameters like pass by value and pass by reference. Do you know the difference? Pass by value and pass by reference. Okay, let me tell you what it is. So now let's say a comma b, and I am going to add same example. I think I could have just recalled it. So I think more than just logging, what if I say update a is equal to a plus 10, b is equal to b plus 10. Yeah, I'm doing something different now. So now what I'm doing outside, I'm going to create a variable called let a is equal to 5 and let b is equal to 10. Now I'll call this function not by directly passing the value, by passing the variables a comma b. You see what I'm writing? Now the question I am asking is, after calling this function, can you tell me what is the value of a and b after this function? What will be the value of a if I print after this line? Here if I try to print a value, what it will be?
15 and 20.
So why it is 15 and 20? Yes, one of the answer is 15 and 20. But do you have any other answer? Okay, let's understand why it is not 15 and 20. Okay, so let me see the output also. Anybody wants to tell me what is the exact answer? Logan, you're there? See what is the answer?
Sir, 35.
35 is just the sum of these two numbers. But my question was what? Question is what is after invoking that function, what is the value? They are 5 and 10 when you passed it to the function. They are 5 and 10. After executing that function also they are 5 and 10. Do you see? You know why they are 5 and 10? Anybody wants to explain? Even after calling that function. Even after calling that function, why they are still 5 and 10?
Sir, inside A and B, it's referring to that outside variable.
I am saying, okay, if they are referring, then we would have got, as you said, it should have become 15 and 20, correct? Money. But then you see they are becoming still 5 and 10. They are not actually referring.
Sir, you declare outside, sir.
I have declared outside. Agreed. But then this is where the concept I am trying to explain. So this is actually copy by value. When I am passing this value and this value, it is actually copying this value into one more variable. This value into one more variable. It is not really updating this outer variable, though it is there outside. So there will be one outside and there is one inside, but both are different. So for this, we also call what is called as scope. I think I'll explain you what is scope. Now maybe I'll have to explain now in this example. Very briefly I'll explain, but later we will see what exactly it is. So let me just recreate that function which was I was creating. So A and B are still there. I'll just put a debugger. This is to, you know, this is just to debug that function. So let me invoke the function with A comma B. Same signature, same thing I'm invoking. Now since I put a debugger, my function will not immediately execute and print the value. Rather, it is going to stop the execution at this point. Not the stop, I should say pause. Okay, the function is going to stop at this line. Yeah, so I'll say pause at this function line. So let's see. If I just enter, it is going to pass. Now the dev tools will give me a very good tools like scope also. What is it? Scope. What did I say just now? We understood what is local and what is global variables, correct? Outer variables are also called as global variables. So when it comes to scope concept, those global variables or outer variables, they are part of this global. So there are so many variables that are defined here. Just to tell you, A and B will be available here also. But actually in this case, no, they are not part of global. I'll tell you, they are part of script. Do you see? 5 and 10, there is one copy here, which is script. And there is one copy which is here, local. So these A and B, they are local variables. So the ones which are script, basically they are the ones which we defined before this, I mean, after this function or before this function we defined using let, correct? So those are those two values. So let's see, once I execute this first line, what happens? You will have more clarity. So now I'm about to execute. Okay, let me execute this. Now you see what happened. It updated this local copy. Then after that, what happened? Do you see any change to the script one? Do you see any change? Answer is
No,
no.
sir.
So since these variable updates are again, we discussed like, okay, they are only visible within this box. I told you they are visible only within the box. That is why as soon as this function is done, let's say I come out of this function. Do you see the local scope?
No, sir.
Do you see as local scope? The function has come out, meaning function has completed execution. You see local scope itself is destroyed, but only the script scope is there. In that script scope, we are seeing 5 and 10 are they are still available. This is the reason. So you are not getting the output what you might, what you are guessing actually. Yeah, so that is one concept. We understood there are three scopes: local scope, script scope, and even global scope. I think I'll have a separate discussion to explain what is that. But the concept I was trying to explain is whenever you're passing even a variable, this is actually passed by value. Value is just copied into that variable. The updates what you do here will not reflect outside. Alright, so let's move on to the next concept which is called default values. What is it called? Default values for the parameter actually, not the function. So default values of function parameters. So now we are understanding about parameters. So now parameters will have some default values, which means what? They've given one example here. So for show message, I have to pass from and text as well. Now what if I don't, give this text? What if I don't give one of this value? Then in that case, I can initialize with some default value. Meaning, so this becomes a default value. For example, if text is not given, then it will have this message called no text given. Is it clear? So default value is if user is omitting, okay, user has omitted to pass or it is invoked by omitting that parameter, then I can set some default values to the parameters. Okay, let me show you a quick example actually. So for example, the same add function. Now I would like to initialize a is equal to 0, b is equal to also 0. When? When user is not sending the value. User is not sending the value of a and b. I don't want my program to break, or I want my program to handle that situation properly. So that's why I can just, even if I call add, it is fine. Correct? Let's say I pass add only 2. Then what will be the output? 2. I pass 2 comma 3. Then 5. So if you pass the value, they are substituted. If you are not passing the value, then these default values are given to that parameters. Yeah, this is what is default values. Okay, just a second guys, I'll be right back. So yeah, I'm not on mute. So we were discussing about default values. Yeah. Okay. So there's one more thing. Let's say I define a function like differently. Okay, a I am given 0, b I have not given a value. So now in this case, tell me what happens if I pass 5 to this function. I pass 5.
Sir, your
It
B
will give
value is
answer as
undefined, and maybe you will get undefined.
So the point is this 5 will not be copied to b because though it has not given default value. This value is given only if I'm not passing the first parameter. So the parameters are positional parameter. If you give both the values, then only b will get a new value. Otherwise b will become undefined. Yes, important thing is just like variable, if you don't pass any value to this parameter, then it becomes undefined. There are two things, okay? So though you're not given a default value, this will not get anything. Okay, you see the answer, it becomes NaN. Why? 5 plus undefined will become NaN, not a number. And another thing I am saying, parameters will have a default value of undefined if you are not passing. Parameters will have default value of undefined, just like variables. If you don't assign any value, then by default they are undefined. Okay. Okay, here they give an alternative to default parameter. Let's say if you are not giving default value, how you should check. You should go on writing this lengthy text, block of code. Let's say you have 5 parameters that you are receiving this function. Then you have to check for everything. Okay, if it is undefined, then give a value. But using this default parameter, or sometimes you will have to do if it is empty and then do like this. But in modern JavaScript, yeah, so we also have a nullish coalescing operator. Yesterday we have learned. If this is not defined, then take this value. Yeah, so these are all alternate to the default parameter. But default parameter syntax is very simple compared to whatever alternatives we have. But here they are showing the different ways, yeah, in which you can give a default values to these parameters. Nothing more than that. Okay, yeah, that is on the default parameters, function default parameters, or default values to those parameters. Next important part in the function is return value. It is always recommended you return value from the function. This way of writing function is actually a bad approach where I am doing console log. See, first of all, functions are reusable piece of code. And what do I do with the result of this function? I should pass it on to the next thing. If I simply just, so console.log, adding console.log as simple as, okay, you are earning a money and you are only spending it. Any, you know, at times we don't like that, correct? Something similar to that. Okay, so always functions are meant to give it, correct? So which means you have to write a return statement. The recommended way to write a code is putting a return value, not log within this. If at all you want for debugging, then you do a console log. Otherwise, so this is the correct way to define function. They should accept parameter, not hard code any value. They should also return the output, not just console log and leave it in the log console. That's expected. Yes, so we can write a return statement within the function body. Whenever this function is executed, this value is passed on or handed off to the to the statement or a variable or to that expression which is invoking that function. For example, now I pass 2, 5. So then you see the result becomes 6. This, whatever return value, I can store it in another variable. Because this function is returning a value, I can actually store it into a variable and I can do further storage, processing and all that possible. If this return statement was not there, then what will be the return value? If I go back to the previous implementation, what will be the return value in this case? Tell me what will be the return value. So we will see here. Yeah, did it take the previous function? Okay, 2, 4. Yeah, because This is printed from this console log. That's why you are getting 6. Okay. So you will not be able to assign it like, okay, let's see is equal to a, 2 comma 10. See now what is there in the C? Undefined. Because this function is not defining anything. So that is one more point to remember. The function is not returning any value. By default, it is going to return undefined. So undefined comes everywhere. Return value of a function is undefined. If you are not giving parameter a value, that is becomes undefined. If you create a variable and you don't initialize it, that also becomes undefined. Fine. So we can have a return so that we pass that value to the callee. Yeah, callee in the sense whoever is invoking this function, we will hand off the result to him. And within a function, we can have one or more return statement. It's not limited that, okay, you can only have one. But if one of the return statement is executed, the other will not get executed. Control will come out of that function. For example, if I write two return statement back to back, then the second code is not reachable. Let's say now you want to stop this function from here, right? You just put return. That's all. Even after this if else, there are another set of lines. They won't get executed because return will be the last line to execute in the function. Yeah. So it will basically make the function exit immediately. And when you are writing return, you can simply put return. This will also return an undefined. If whatever value you give here, let's say you give a value, you give a plus b, whatever you want to write, that is what is actually returned to the return as an output from this function. And there is no restriction what you can return. You can return a value, you can return you can return another function also in JavaScript. That is possible. Getting what I'm saying? No restriction on what you can return. You can return a function. The return value of this is a function now. Let me show you quickly one example. Yeah, you might have not seen this, but in JavaScript this is possible. Okay, so this is a nested function. Now you see I'm going to call this function add. See, can you tell me what is the return value? It's a function. Which one? The one which I'm returning here. Correct? The one which I'm returning, that is a function. Now, how do I call that function? I have to put one more parenthesis. This is to call that first function. Since the first function is returning another function, ideally what we should do, let's say, let function is equal to add. Again, now I have to call this f1. See, now I got this inside function executed. But there is another way to execute the same function. I can put one more parenthesis like this. Okay, so there is one concept which is called function currying. What is it? Function currying. So let's not get into all that, but for now I'm just showing you, what is the return value, what is possible to return within the function, and if at all I get to return a function, then I can execute how to execute it. Okay, so they have defined all this. You practice each of these examples and let me know if there are any questions. We can discuss further. Next thing is naming a function. I think we discussed about naming a variables. Function names are also named similar to variables. In terms of rules, and what to name, you can use, yeah, in terms of the characters, alphabets. Numbers are allowed. Space and special character like star, underscore and dollar only allowed within the name. That is the syntax. But in terms of, how to write a function name, I think they're talking more on how to write a function name or how to choose a function name, not on the syntax. So this is, many people will do a mistake. Simply they will name something. Simply name something, test. Okay, some random name. No, you should not do it. They're saying use get, calc if at all you want to do calculation, create if at all that function is creating something, check if that function is validating something or checking, comparing something. So use these words. So with that words itself, it makes more sense. Okay, what is that function doing? Yeah. And another golden rule they are saying, one function should do only one action. In a function, you can write how many ever lines. There is no restriction on how many ever lines. But it is always a good practice is to have only one thing. Correct? So it's like, a keypad, right? One key press should do only one thing, correct? It cannot do multiple things. But I want multiple things, I can do a combination. Can combine the function. Okay, so choose or write a function name so that the name itself should give me the full meaning of it. You can use these verbs, yeah? Get, put, update. These are like examples. Okay, just a minute. I think I'll have to take this call. Take a call. I think I didn't mute. Okay, let's continue. So that was on the different aspects of any functions. Okay, we are not talking about this is only for function declaration. Parameters, variables, local and outer, default values, return value, naming, all these things are applicable to all the functions. And in the previous class, we already discussed what is a function expression syntax. This is declaration syntax. This is called expression syntax. It is called expression because it looks like left hand side and right hand side. Yeah. Okay. And function is a value. This is very important to understand. I think I also gave a clue of this yesterday. I can pass one function itself as a parameter value. Do you understand? Yeah. We can pass function itself to some other function. Why? Because function is a value. That's what you're saying. Okay, function is a value. That's why you can treat it like a function as a value also, and then you can pass it on. All right. Okay, this is very important. So you'll have to remember this. Also, it is possible to copy this function into a variable. Can assign it like a variable. And then once you assign it, this you can invoke it like a function. Yeah. So confusing stuff. Okay. So let me show you what they are actually talking here. Meaning, let's say I have created a function earlier, add. Now I want this add. Okay, so I've created add and I'm doing return a plus b. That's fine. Now I can store the reference of this, or I can copy this function into another variable called let's say, one more variable called sum is equal to add. Now what happens? This function reference is copied into this variable. Since this is holding now the reference of a function, the sum, I can invoke this. Yeah, I'm getting NaN because I am not passing a proper values. But I can, if I invoke, then I'm going to get a different value. Getting it? So this is also an example for function expression syntax. See here I am writing function. So instead of add, I'm going to write some anonymous function itself without a name. And this is actually called function, passing as a value, and how you can even pass a value to a variable itself, and that variable you can invoke it like this. Right? So in the function expression, okay, there is one syntactical difference here. So they're talking about that, meaning in normal function we don't write semicolon, but at the end of function expression syntax, so we end up putting semicolon also. Why? Just like an expression. It is not part of the function syntax, but since it is an expression, so we generally write, let's say I is equal to 5. Then we put semicolon, right? The same way, since we are assigning a function to this variable, yeah, it is recommended to have this value at the end of the statement. So don't think that it is part of the function syntax, it is just part of the statement. It's recommended, again, optional. Even if you don't put, it works. Again, semicolon is optional for every JavaScript statement. We already discussed, at times, semicolon will not actually work. Okay, so let's move on. So function is a value. I'm again telling function is a value. Now since function is a value, it is also possible we can pass this to another function. Yeah, we can pass a function to another function. Within that function, passed function, for example, you are now for ask you are passing, see for ask you are passing function. Show okay as a function, show cancel is also a function. Now you see we are receiving this parameter. In this, the question is a string. Yes and no is actually a function. So now yes and no we will be calling it. For example, if we ask the user with this question, are you sure you want to confirm? If he says yes, then we will call a function which is called yes. If he says no, then we will call a function called no. So let's see the output. So do you agree? That is what is the question. If I click OK, then you agreed this function will be called. You click on cancel, then show cancel is called. Let's see how you agreed called, right? So now this function show OK and show cancel are actually called as callback functions. I already introduced this term the other day when I was explaining, functions are also callback functions. Why callback function? I pass this function as per the normal parameter syntax or as a syntax, but then this function is called later. I don't know whether it is yes is called or no is called, but at times at one stage this will be invoked, or even this is also invoked. correct? It will be invoked later at some point. That depends completely on what is the logic I am writing within this ask. So these two functions are actually called as callback function, meaning they are called back after some time. So as simple as, so I'm calling someone, so if he is busy, he'll say, call me back later. So then, according to that, so you are going to call him back again. Okay, so callbacks are heavily used in JavaScript. Passing a function to another function is a very common pattern. You should remember this. Yeah, function is a value, and then you're supposed to invoke it later. So you should learn the syntax basically, or be familiar with it. Array functions are callback. There are many. Okay, I think we'll come to the last point for today's discussion, which is expression versus declaration. So what is the difference? Just to tell you, yesterday we already discussed about it. So function declaration syntax, okay, it is actually called hoisted, meaning I can invoke this function much before even its declaration. Yeah. So they're saying the difference is, first thing, on how they're created. Second thing is function expression. For example, now if I define sum, you can only call this function after it has been created, not before that. Just like variables, since the initialization will not happen, yeah, so hoisting, even if you do hoisting, without hoisting, yeah, so this assignment has to happen, then only I can call this function. Till then I cannot call, but whereas here I can call as soon, even before it is, this declaration is not there. I can call it in the first line itself. I can invoke sum. Yesterday I think I've shown you a detailed example also. So again, we are just reiterating that those are the difference. One is in terms of creation, another one is in terms of at what moment I can call. Yeah. Okay, I think we should now stop here. Yeah, they've given a lot of examples. Yeah. It is very common, like we use function declaration. Expressions are used, but rare. But yeah, so you should be knowing both the syntax. Yeah, so it's a rare case where it would go for function expression. Again, same answer as I said. I won't be able to tell you each and every line what is here, and yeah, you know what I'm covering every day. So here I'm just helping you to learn this concept quickly. Let's say you are reading it, you don't understand, then you can quickly go back to my video on what I've explained, how I've explained. Okay, and again, for every thing they have given an example, and you can revise from this. Okay, so with this I think I'll stop here. We'll continue with arrow functions tomorrow.
Sir, before stopping, in that function expression section,